The topics and opinions expressed on the following show are solely those of the hosts and their guests and not those of W4WN Radio, its employees, or affiliates. We make no recommendations or endorsements for radio show programs, services, or products mentioned on air or on our web. No liability, explicit or implied, shall be extended to W4WN Radio, its employees, or affiliates. Any questions or comments should be directed to those show hosts. Thank you for choosing W4WN Radio.
This is Beyond Confidence with your host, Divya Parekh. Do you want to live a more fulfilling life? Do you want to live your legacy and achieve your personal, professional, and financial goals? Well, coming up on Divya Parekh's Beyond Confidence, you will hear real stories of leaders, entrepreneurs, and achievers who have stepped into discomfort, shattered their status quo, and are living the life they want. You will learn how relationships are the key to achieving your aspirations and financial goals. Moving your career or business forward does not have to happen at the expense of your personal or family life, or vice versa. Learn more at www.divyaparekh.com, and you can connect with Divya at contact@divyaparekh.com. This is Beyond Confidence, and now here's your host, Divya Parekh.
Good morning, listeners. So thrilled to be here with you. It's one of my favorite times of the week. And for folks who are on Tampa side, I've got some really dear friends and clients out there. We are keeping you in our prayers and hope each and every one of you remain safe through the Hurricane Ian. And thinking about you folks. So moving on, I want to thank each and every one of you who has taken the time to get our books, leave us a review, and especially Expert to Influencer and the Entrepreneur's Garden, because partial profits from our books go to kiva.org. And we have been able to help so many entrepreneurs across the globe because of your support. And also, folks, I invite you to spend that 1 hour of your time helping somebody with no strings attached every month. Think about it. Even if it is 20 million, 30 million, 100 million, the magnitude of people coming together and just spending 1 hour of their time every month can be huge. So for those who don't know who I am, I just wanted to kind of give you a brief that our team, we partner with high achieving entrepreneurs and leaders to help them create a narrative that they're confident in. And we work at 3 levels, helping them with mindset, skill set. We help you hone your skill sets and help you take action so you can live the life and have the business you deserve in your style. All right, let's get started. Welcome, Susan.
Good morning, Divya.
Good morning. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. I'm coming to you from Atlanta, Georgia. And I have to say, saying your beautiful name, I looked up its meaning, divine brilliance. That is a powerful name that you have.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. So, Susan, we always begin at the beginnings. When you were a child, did you have any vision of what you were going to be when you were going to grow up?
I suppose if I look at my career, I have to go back to shopping with my mom at a store in Michigan where I grew up. And the name of the store was Just Pants. And I looked at my mom and said, why are they selling shirts in a store called Just Pants? So I go back to that story because I ended up going into branding and marketing and then business development and now client development. And one funny thing, Divya, my daughter was young and we were in the Minute Clinic, and I won't say where. Some of you might know. I don't want to put shade on any drugstore, but anyway, she said, Mom, why do they call this the Minute Clinic? We've been waiting an hour. So she's in sales at High Point University. So I suppose we're wired in certain ways and we go that direction, but that's my retail beginnings.
That is an adorable story. So was there anybody while you were growing up that left an impact on you?
My mind just went to business, but I have to go personal on this because my parents, they've been married 56 years. They are both 80 this year. We
Hmm.
celebrated them this summer up in Michigan on Lake Michigan. And, those earliest years are so formative, and home is where your story begins, and they gave me the greatest beginning to life that a kid could ever ask for. We weren't wrinkle-free, we weren't perfect, but there's no greater unconditional love that was poured into me than from my parents.
Oh, that's so powerful. And congratulations for your parents being married 56 years, and that's unheard of nowadays. So, congratulations to them. And what a great story, because I can tell you that when parents share that unconditional love, they're giving the best gift they can to their children. So, share with us as you were in high school and going off beyond high school, what showed up for you?
I'm sorry, Divya, what showed up for me?
Hmm. In terms of your preferences, where did your life take you? How did you show up for life?
Oh, this is funny. And my dad, who was a CFO, very successful CFO, started on a card table and then went off and built a company that was acquired. And after 25 years, did extremely well. But I saw the humble beginnings and hard work can bring great success. But my sweet dad, who was a CFO, had to work with me almost nightly on math because I was horrible at math and accounting. I once got a test back from Mr. Potts, and everybody else got a grade, and my test said, "See me quickly." And here's the funniest part, Divya. I ended up working for two of the largest global accounting firms in the world. Arthur Andersen before it imploded with the legal problems, and then Ernst& Young. I was there for a decade. My dad was just and still is mystified. Like, you work with accountants and attorneys, do they know you can't do math? So that was my beginnings in how I knew what I was not good
Hmm. No, and definitely math was something I was not a fan of either.
at.
And it's not that I couldn't do it, I just never had any interest in it. I could sit with a biology book and look at the intricacies of what made the body tick, or what made the world go around. And there's just something about math, it was dry, and it depends. And that's why it's amazing, how the world is filled with different people. And when we celebrate differences, it makes life so beautiful. And I love that story. Like, what you're sharing is that you are working with accountants and people who love math. And that goes to show what a relationship can hold.
Ooh, that's right.
And so, fine, you didn't like math. And beyond that, tell us, like, what did you major in, and what was your area of concentration?
Sure. I went to Marquette University in Milwaukee, across the lake from Lake Michigan. So I'm a Lake Michigan fan. And if you haven't been, everyone should go visit Lake Michigan. It's my favorite. I studied marketing, got a degree in marketing from Marquette University, and a minor in journalism. So I do enjoy writing still to this day. And the curiosity you'll hear as we go through some of my tips and tools and approaches I share with your listeners and viewers. It's very journalistic. It's being curious. Albert Einstein said, "Be always curious," and that's really what a journalist is asking those questions and digging for facts. So that, with my work and client loyalty and trying to understand where a client is coming from, it's pretty interesting how that takes me right back to those classrooms. In marketing, I just love, the 4 Ps of marketing, and everything about marketing. I just really enjoy to this day.
Well, that's fantastic. So you did your marketing, and where did your journey kind of take you after that? Like, did you just kind of go and work with accountants, or you became an entrepreneur? What
Well,
was the
no,
transition?
I started out, I moved to Boston right after graduating and was there for 6 years, and I, followed what you might expect with a marketing major, and I ended up going to an ad agency, a full service marketing agency right there on Summer Street in Boston. I'm a city girl too. I love tall buildings in big cities. And I remember taking a job I'm 22 when you graduate college, and I accepted a position for $18,000. And I'm like, I just want to make my age. I just want to make my age. But I progressed up and ended up being in the media buying department and was there for 6 years, I think. And just really, I did make my age and more eventually. And I enjoyed that. It was when I moved to Atlanta in 96 when the Olympics were coming. And my dog got tangled up with another dog, and that other dog owner worked for Arthur Andersen in the tax department. And so began my journey into the accounting Big Four, Big Six then, and now Big Four world.
And how is it working with accountants?
Oh, I have to be very careful here. I actually love it because they bring something to the table that I don't have the skill sets, and again, back to my dad being mystified of how do they know about your skills? And I said, it is a brilliant combination. I used to go out to business development meetings to prospective clients with this. He was the most quiet person I have ever encountered to this day. And we would drive along out to these meetings, and it was silent most of the time. And I was so uncomfortable most of the time. Sometimes I would say, I'm not going to speak until he says something, because I feel like I'm talking too much and I want to be calm and kind of match where he is. And we would ride for 30 minutes without saying anything, but it was a real discipline for me. But once we got in that meeting, I was able to connect with that prospective client and guide and facilitate that conversation. He went off and talked, it was family wealth planning. He talked, sometimes it was like another language to me, and the numbers or international tax, expatriate taxes, things that I didn't get, but then we would wrap around, I'd facilitate, I'd close up with an action plan and all of our follow through activities. Again, it was just the greatest match.
So powerful.
To your point, all of our skills, we need it all to be truly successful.
Absolutely. And I know you quite often talk about the London train sign, mind the gap. Tell us, how did that make its way in your vocabulary?
Sure. I happen to have one right here. I did not steal it. I purchased it. I've only been to London 3 times, but this sign early on, it was right out of college, this sign, mind the gap. And I do realize, people, that it is called the London Tube, but I didn't know. I want to make sure everybody understands what the heck I'm talking about. But these signs are in the train station, and it simply is the gap between the platform and the tube coming into the railway station. And again, if you don't mind the gap, you're going to fall and hurt yourself. And the same is true in relationships. And Divya, I love that in your intro package, it says, you even believe relationships are key to achieving your aspirations. So whether it be professionally or personally, relationships are critical to your success. And really, as your relationships go, so goes your life. The quality of your life is really determined by the quality of your relationships. So back to the train sign, when there's gaps that occur, and they occur because we get busy, we forget to communicate, we're just human, we're imperfect humans. So gaps occur. My whole mission, professionally and personally, is to address those gaps, to mind the gap early, before it becomes a crisis. And I love to mind the gap when they're small or not at all. You check in periodically to see if there's potential of a gap coming, or a disappointment. Could start with a small disappointment, but address those gaps early on, keep them small or not at all. But I am well versed in talking about huge client crisis and even personal relationship crisis for gaps that were not attended to.
Mm-hmm. So as you explained about the London Tube, and I can share that, even if you're riding a New York subway or a Washington, D.C. metro, they do say that, watch your step, because there is that gap.
Right.
And the key is that having that awareness. So many times what happens is that people don't set expectations. People fall into relationships, whether it is a new boss, or whether your peer becoming your boss, or somebody getting promoted to become a boss, or you're connecting with other peers, or like, it is that marketing, you are working with a prospect, or you are working with, let's say, um, vendors. I mean, there's so many different relationships, whether it's personal or professional.
Right.
Tell us, how can people find those gaps?
Your audience is going to think we practice this, because that is the best segue I could ask for, because it does come down to expectations, and we have so much common ground. Even when I first met you, and now we don't like math, and now you think expectations are all about expectations, that determines your success. You couldn't be more correct. And my kids sometimes like, oh no, she wants to have another meeting. She's got the flip chart out. But an expectations exchange can happen at work, and it can happen at home. And I recommend not bringing the flip chart out at home, because that could be viewed negatively, like that you might lose them with the flip chart at home. But it's just simple. It can start with one simple question. And I guess if there's one thing you take away from this show today, that is, ask someone you value most, or your priority client. Just ask somebody today, before the day is out, how do you define success as it relates to this project? How do you define success as it relates to this meeting? A vacation. I have asked my kids, how do you define, what's one thing that could happen on this vacation for you to make it amazing and extraordinary? It can go the full gamut, but how do you define success can open up a deeper, more connected conversation. And then remember what's shared. Record, document what's shared, because that attentive listening shows that you value their input and you're going to take action on it. So that's one of my favorite questions. Or another way to ask it might be, what does a win look like for you?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And that is so powerful, because you're not just putting your expectations on someone. You want to know what they're looking for. You want to know that what is that outcome they're seeking. Is
Right.
it personal? Like, whether, let's say, even if you are in a professional setting, whether you're with your client, or whether you're sitting with your peers or boss, like any setting, or you're presenting it to the leadership team.
Mm-hmm.
The key thing, like, you hit upon something very powerful. What does success look like? And it's asking, what is it that they are looking for in the outcome? And when you know that, it's so much easier to fulfill those expectations. And then if you find the gap, if it's not aligning with your values,
That's right.
you can have that conversation ahead of time, before the conflict even happens. So I definitely like that. So let's say, let's explore that. Now somebody comes back and gives you the definition of success that's completely opposite to what your definition is. And now you are working together. What's someone going to do?
Mind the gap. You're so right. And I have clients take great concern with this approach of listening first and asking these open-ended, I call them high gain questions, because you're going to gain a tremendous amount. And to your point, Divya, they may be it may be a huge gap just hearing their definition of success or the win. But that's why it's called an expectations exchange, because you get to share your view and you get to see how big that gap is. But people get all up in arms sometimes is, wait a minute, you're expecting me then to go exceed those expectations? And I say, no, not at all. To your point, Divya, you simply hear them out, you document them, you take a look at them. And that's why I like to say it's an expectations exchange. At some point, you then share your expectations, or what the win looks like for you. But then you get to work together as a team, closing that gap. And again, not exceeding every expectations. What I like to say is you have to manage some of them, because perhaps you can't meet or even exceed. Even when you can't meet an expectation, you communicate that up front so there's no surprises. So it is an expectations exchange. It can be informal, it can be a 4-hour breakout meeting, but in any case, you listen first, you clearly understand how they define the win, then you get to share yours. you define the gap, and then get to work on closing the gap or minding the gap if you're in London.
Mm-hmm. So you, you definitely said something that resonated with me is that there are no surprises,
Ooh, yeah.
managing expectations. And that's the key because not every single time you are able to help them achieve every single point
Mhm.
because that's where again like the prioritization comes in that okay you want 10 points to happen now out of these 10 points what may be like 5 points that are
Right.
so important to you and that will impact the organization, that will impact your team, that needs to be done, and where can we reach compromise. Now, that said, still, so many times what happens is that there is a listening thing that minute you hear something that's not aligned with you, and your brain takes a U turn and goes somewhere else. So, during this situation, having some unique listening techniques would be a great help. So, would you like to share a few techniques?
Yes, so many things you said. I want to jot down because I will forget them all. Start, stop, continue. Uh, okay, yes, absolutely. You said you take a U-turn when you start hearing those expectations that don't align with you. What did you mean by that, and where do you go when you do that U-turn? I'm so curious.
Well, U-turn is that you're retreating in yourself. So think about a turtle. A turtle is enjoying the sun, they hear a footfall, and immediately they retreat back in their shell. So what happens
Ah,
is that, yeah, you're whenever somebody is out of alignment or maybe pushing you towards your zone of discomfort, you retreat back and then you're not able to hear them
oh,
what
so
the other
true.
person is saying. So it's about bringing the mindfulness that, yes, I'm experiencing some discomfort here. I'm experiencing distress, but
Mhm.
breathing through it, bringing the awareness, again, shifting the focus, not to yourself, but
Yes.
to them. And when you shift that focus to them, that's where you're going to start understanding because then you're open and curious, like you mentioned, and be able to ask more questions to get more context.
We have to work together because that was so well said. And I like how you said you go back into your shell. I will add to that and give maybe the darker side of going into the shell. And yes, discomfort will send you right back inside and cause you to be less courageous than you need to be in that moment. But here's the thing, too, human nature. You hear some of these things, or maybe this is more when there's a real crisis, but you may want to defend, you may want to manipulate them to come back your direction, you may want to complain, like we can never do enough for you. You may want to respond in those negative ways, but it's not the time to do that when you're asking them what their expectations are. You had asked about listening techniques. One of my favorite things, and I did not bring it today because I have one prop and I try and leave it to one prop only, and I got my mind the gap sign, but I have a Native American listening stick. And it's basically just a long pole with some feathers on the end. But that listening stick is passed around to the people participating in any conversation, and you are not allowed to pass that listening stick to someone else unless you can repeat back what you heard. And if you didn't hear it correctly, the person speaking can help you clarify. But until you can repeat that back, you can't speak and you can't pass that listening stick. That's one of my favorite things as it relates to active, genuine listening. It's tough. It's tough and it takes some practice.
Oh, I love that. Oh, that's powerful. Anything else comes to your mind before we move on?
I think just getting the ego out of the way, getting your agenda out of the way. And again, that takes practice too.
Absolutely. And the need of being right.
Oh,
Because
that's a
whenever,
good That's
oh,
especially true, Divya, in a client crisis or a relational crisis. That is a big one. The need to be right, to control, that's when that comes out. All those ugly things that we humans can do, that's when that really comes out when you haven't minded the gap and it becomes a massive eruption of crisis. That's when it's really tough to listen.
Hmm. Tell us more about that crisis because I know you're an expert at that.
Well, there's a funny story. Wasn't funny then, but it's the biggest client crisis I have ever encountered. And it is so unbelievable. You can't imagine it really happened. And it ruined my vacation because I was only 3 days into a 7-day vacation. But if you want to go read the full story, there's a free, and actually I updated it just for today because I hadn't looked at it in about 5 years. But there is a free downloadable, and I actually see the beach ball. I was at the beach. This is called the Client Crisis Rescue. And it is packed with do's and don'ts when you run into a client crisis of massive proportions. But what you have in here, Divya, you had said my website is rockbizinc.com, and it's hot off the press. Last night updated, but it is packed full of do's and don'ts. 6 steps you can take to restore trust and forward momentum with your client. But this pinstripe suit still hangs in my closet because I had to go buy this pinstripe suit at a small mall in Florida and fly to a client crisis the next morning. Real short, what happened, and it's usually better, and there's a video on my homepage too that gives you if this is confusing verbally, it shows you what actually happened. But so client A, or no, let's go to the engagement team. They were going for a $1.2 million engagement with prospect Z. This engagement team put in the proposal that prospect Z should call existing client A. Of course they did. Prospect Z calls into client A, and client A says, this is a true story, something must be very wrong. We are actively, as in right now, putting together a proposal to put that work out for bid. And that firm you're calling about isn't getting an RFP, a request for proposal. So prospect Z is a bit in shock, calls back to the firm that I am working with. And I was a client relations executive. I was not on that engagement team because this would not have happened. You always check your references first to make sure they're happy before you have a prospective client call in. Well, anyway, client A calls, prospective Z calls, everything's blowing up. I am on a lounge chair poolside having a lovely time, and I get the call. Have to get the full ensemble. So this pinstripe, it's cheap, it doesn't fit me right, but I will never get rid of it because it reminds me you must manage by fact, not assumptions. And how do you do that? You ask open-ended, high-gain questions. So that's a long answer, but that's a big doozy now. Should I tell your viewers and listeners and audience how it ends, or should they go find out?
Of course, I'm sure they're going to be curious.
Okay, I will tell the ending of the story. So, of course, this is when, some say I wear a superhero cape in these situations. And I guess I love these situations because you can only go up. I mean, you're already at the bottom, so you can only succeed. And so I take it as a great challenge. But more so, I enjoy really connecting with people and trying, and this is maybe that journalism background of trying to get to the bottom of things and learning a perspective of how did this get so off the rails? How did this go so sideways and become such a mess? And so I did what I do best. My first order of business was talking to the top executives and stakeholders at client A because we wanted to retain that work. My objective was to diffuse the RFP process completely. That didn't happen, but the success there was that we actually were able to repropose on our existing work. What a waste of time, money, energy. Global team came flying in. I mean, months and months of putting together a proposal for work we should have already had. So it was an exorbitant amount of money we put into that. We did retain client A, but let me tell you, the price tag associated is, I wish I would have calculated it, but it was just outrageous. No shock to learn. Prospect Z, I attempted, whether we win or lose proposals, I like to go in and get a debrief. Because if you lose, you want to improve your go-to-market strategy. You can learn so much, even with a loss, and improve the next time. If you win, you want to know what those success factors were so that you can replicate them in the future. Well, Prospect Z is like, no, thank you. I don't want to meet. We don't want to meet with you. But was able to do some phone interviews. They weren't willing to give us any time, in-person time, but I was able to learn enough. And again, it's not a mystery. We dug our own doom in that case. But here's the thing, and Divya, you know this too, that word of mouth and the sharing. Can you imagine? I didn't say what client, but you can guess that Prospect Z is talking about that firm that was so idiotic to include a reference of a very dissatisfied client. So that word of mouth, you cannot put a price tag on that. That's a lot of damage done to a brand.
Yep. And that's the crisis management, a good story out there. And did Z client come and work with you or no?
Prospect Z, long gone, ran for the hills. And rightly so. I get it.
Yeah. Yeah, especially if, because they lose trust in you, and trust is the bane of any good business, and especially for sustaining that success. So you mentioned something very beautiful in that, like that you went and managed the crisis.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of times what happens is that during the marketing, people lose their marbles when crisis is happening. And sometimes you do things that you regret later
Mm-hmm.
on. So during that time, what would you recommend to our listeners that they do so that they can keep their presence? Yes, things are going, how should I say, like things are hitting the fan and it happens, it's life. But when that happens, how can people keep their cool?
Well, what comes to mind, top of mind, first off, you have got to go into a room and take some deep breaths. What you do not want to do, and this is in that downloadable free resource, you do not want to go electronic. You do not want to text. You do not want to email. Use those things for information, not for resolution. Do not email, text, do nothing electronic at all. What I would recommend is first of all, step away and get grounded, get your deep breathing in and get your mind together before you do anything. Secondly, do not put anything in writing. You want to pick up the phone. Now, the only thing you could do with text is, can I please call you? What is a good time to call you? That's all. You're not going to do any issue resolution electronically. That is the biggest minefield you could enter into. And that's where regrets come in. Because as you say, Divya, when you're losing your marbles, the last thing you want to do is start typing away. Don't do it. Get in person and preferably at their site. Post-COVID, people are still not doing in-person meetings, but I'll tell you, 70% or more of communication is body language. You want to be there to see it. You want to be there to connect. You want to shake hands. You want to get that in-person connection and human connection that can only take place live. This is the next best medium that we're doing here because at least we can see each other's body language. You can see if you're not buying anything I'm saying or engaged in the conversation. It's just critical to avoid electronic anything in the moment of crisis and to go in person to get that human connection as quickly as possible.
Agreed. And you said something very powerful, that it's important to have that in-person connection. And that's so important because when somebody's sitting down, and of course it may not be possible, especially in today's day and age, people are working remotely. So many
Right.
people are even going and living in other countries. At least have a Zoom call. And also what you can do is, like you are called, call in the troops.
Yes.
Call in people who may be more of an expert. And that's where a lot of people forget to ask for help. It's okay to ask for help because now a lot more is on the line than just you having to negotiate with them. And there was another thing that you mentioned about debriefing, that regardless whether a prospect is saying yes or no, you do the debrief, and that's one of the great marketing tools, and I agree. So, are there any specific questions that you would encourage our entrepreneur listeners to use it for their debriefings?
Sure. Can I say one more thing about I may have to give you royalties for all these doing the U-turn, call in the troops. I might give you royalties for all these phrases in the middle of a crisis, calling in the troops. And you triggered this thought. If you cannot be objective, if you're so emotionally charged up, because the client may be crazy, you might be absolutely right, but you may want to bring someone with you who is objective to the engagement. And they may bring the voice of reason. They are not biased in any way. Now, they may be with the firm and employee, but they're not close to the situation. So I want to add and emphasize what you said. Call in the troops. We're better together. We are better together, and that voice of reason may be needed. So call in the troops. I may have to steal that. Okay.
It's not my phrase.
I love it. But as far as a debrief, when you win or lose, you could, here's the thing, and it ties back. Oh, this has come full circle. Because even if you're going to put a proposal out, what did we say before? Treat this prospect like a client. Have an expectations exchange. How do they define success? So if you start that way, and even if you don't, if you fail to, that debrief, especially if you win, could be something to the effect of, back when we first met you before this proposal process, you stated that your success factors were A, B, and C. We won the engagement. So what is it that we communicated that gave you, as you said, Divya, the trust to know that we were the right team for you or the right company for you? If you lost that proposal opportunity, you could say, first of all, if you didn't do an expectations exchange up front, that is probably why you lost. Can I share a stat that I love? The number one driver of overall satisfaction in any relationship, professional or personal, but it really comes into play here with a lost debrief, is, and I don't do math, but they find this by a regression analysis, and I don't know how that's done, but by a ratio of 2-to-1, the number one driver of overall client satisfaction or relational satisfaction is understanding needs and expectations up front. So back to that debrief, if you lost, you could simply say, in what area, and take it, you could go through the RFP, the proposal, and say, where was the gap? And where did we not close the gap for you? We would love to continuously improve if you could help us. Now, if you lost and they're going to give you an hour, send them a Starbucks card. Care and share and keep that connection for future reference, because you never know. It's just great to keep your network connected and show gratitude. So if you lost the proposal, they're going to give you time. That's something to personally thank with a handwritten note and a Starbucks card, or you should maybe ask them, what is your favorite, snack at 3:00 in the afternoon? Send them a bag of chips, whatever it is, especially if you lost and if you won. But if they're going to give you that time so that you can continuously improve your go-to-market strategy, thank them.
No, absolutely. Because as you said, if they give you the time, nowadays people don't give that time.
Right.
So it's so important to be grateful and give them that respect that, like, hey, it doesn't matter. And that's where a lot of people make that mistake. They consider that prospect as nothing but a cash machine. And when you do that, you're already losing half of the battle. And what happens is that it's so critical that you see them as a person. What are their needs? And have that expectations exchange, as you mentioned. Some very powerful points here. So how can our audience reach out to you? Where can they connect with you? And what's next for you?
Well, as I mentioned, first of all, and this is great because I'm just here to add value to all of you. I don't have a book yet, but I have to say, Divya, what do you have now? 15 books?
I do.
I'm trying to do one, and I have a whole new respect for authors who have 2 books, let alone 15. So congratulations on finishing and doing well and becoming a best-selling author, because it's a lot of work.
Congratulations. That's such
Oh,
a
I only have 2
moment in life.
chapters. I only have 2 chapters, so hold the congratulations maybe till first quarter next year, but I'll be back
It
to you.
doesn't matter. You've started the journey. It's so critical to celebrate each step of the journey.
It is. It's exciting, but I do have a whole new level of appreciation for published authors like yourself. So I don't have a book yet. I do keynotes, I do consulting, but here's what I'd love your audience to do is to go to Rock Biz Inc., ROCKBIZINC.com, and there is a free downloadable resource that is just packed full. And there's do's and don'ts. It's simple. I do things simple. And a lot of great tips. And again, don't just think about it, taking that guide that you can download to work. Bring it home too. And it can impact all of your relationships. And as you say, Divya, in your opening package, is relationships just help you, they improve the quality of your life if you do them well. So go download the free resource and enjoy. And you can read more about my black pinstripe pantsuit purchased at the mall.
Well, thank you, Susan. Enjoyed our conversation, and thank you for sharing your wisdom. And thank you, listeners, for joining us, because without you, the show would not be possible. You are just amazing, and we love you. We are here to serve and support you. So reach out as you always do. What is it that we can bring you so that it can make a difference in your life and you can live the life you deserve and in style? And Juan, thank you for making this show possible. And so, folks, take care and be well.
Thank you for being part of Beyond Confidence with your host, Divya Parekh. We hope you have learned more about how to start living the life you want. Each week on Beyond Confidence, you hear stories of real people who have experienced growth by overcoming their fears and building meaningful relationships. During Beyond Confidence, Divya Parekh shares what happened to her when she stepped out of her comfort zone to work directly with people across the globe. She not only coaches people how to form heart connections, but also transform relationships to mutually beneficial partnerships as they strive to live the life they want. If you are ready to live the life you want and leverage your strengths, learn more at www.divyaparekh.com. And you can connect with Divya at contact@divyaparekh.com. We look forward to you joining us next week.